A whole generation spent 38 years close to the promised land, but not in the promised land. Can anybody relate? It's like the promised land's on the other side of that line. It's on the other side of that border. And you spend your whole life trying to step into your promised land, but you never seem to be able to quite get in there. The biggest key to your success, and I'm talking about kingdom success, living in the way that God has destined for you, the biggest key to your success in 2026 is hearing God's voice. That's it. That's the biggest key. If you learn to hear God's voice, you're going to step into the inheritance that He has for you. If you don't learn to hear God's voice, then you're going to be shut out of the fullness of the destiny that He has for you. That's how significant it is. And so this very, very simple key often gets overlooked. And I'm wanting to trumpet it to you this morning, because sometimes the simple things get missed, and we're trying to live our lives and we're using all these different tools and keys that we think are going to help us, but we're forgetting the most important thing, the most strategic thing, which is hearing the voice of God. As I've already said, in the voice of God is an equipping and an empowering that enables us to do things that we weren't able to do before. And so whereas before you'd come up to the Goliath in your life and you'd go to open your mouth and the words would just fall out, like you got to open your mouth and the paralysis would come around you and there would be no words that would come out. But when God speaks to you and He gives you an instruction, there's an empowering, and yes, your voice might still be quivering. I've had situations in my life, in my early Christian life, where I would be trembling a lot. I don't tremble as much now, but how do you confront fear? How do you overcome fear? You actually have to confront it. You have to walk through the fear. And it's the same with rejection. I wish rejection would magically go away, but actually always to get set free from rejection, you have to face the rejection. And when you face it, you actually feel it. It's actually right there in your face, the fear, the rejection, the shame, whatever it is. But now you can look at that thing with God, knowing that God is with you. And each time you face it, its power gets less. And the healing of God, when you face it, it opens a door for the healing of God to come in. Because when you realize how much power it has over you and you realize God's with you, next thing you start opening your heart and gaining trust and letting God in a little bit more, and the healing oil begins to touch your heart. Sometimes you might have to go back and face the same Goliath 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. But every time you face the Goliath, you get a little bit stronger. And so God's voice is always empowering us to live righteous. That's really good news. You don't have to overcome sin in your own strength. He doesn't ask you to overcome sin in your own strength. He says, this is the righteous standard. The righteous standard is Jesus. And I'm going to give you everything I gave to Jesus. It's a pretty profound thought. He hasn't actually withheld anything from us. You don't believe me? Who thinks that's a bit of an outlandish statement? Do you believe me? Everything He gave to Jesus, He's given to us. He's not asking us to live a righteous life without the enablement that Jesus had, without the empowering that Jesus had. Ephesians 1:3, for we have been blessed with every spiritual blessing in heavenly places. Now, let me ask you a question. Does every leave anything out? We have been blessed with every spiritual blessing. So is God withholding anything from us at all? Every means every. And God actually says, I'm going to give you Jesus' righteousness. That's what He says. And so when we go to bat, when we face up to the enemy, we're not coming with our righteousness, we're coming with Jesus' righteousness. And so that means we are 100% righteous. We have the same, think about it, we have the same righteousness as Jesus Christ. Will that help you when you're dealing with condemnation and shame and rejection and feeling like you're no good? Doesn't matter whether you're the, how do I say this? Doesn't matter whether you are been in the kingdom many years and you've overcome many things in your life, or you just feel like you're a new Christian and you're failing all the time and sin just seems to have a grip on you and you're saying, God, I want to overcome, but you keep tripping up. It doesn't matter which one of those two categories you are, you both have the same righteousness. It's his free gift. It's the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And as we embrace that free gift of righteousness, our whole life gets transformed. And we actually begin to look like Jesus and act like Jesus. Because in that free gift of righteousness, there's an empowerment for you to walk in the fullness of righteousness in every area of your life. Hallelujah. So that's why it's important to hear God's voice, because there's a provision in his voice. And when he speaks to you, there's a grace empowerment that enables you to do everything he's told you to do. So it's really important to hear God's voice. In Deuteronomy chapter 9 and verse 23, it says this, and when Yahweh sent you, this is Moses speaking to the nation of Israel, and when Yahweh sent you out from Kadesh Barnea, we need to pay attention to that place in just a minute, Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and take possession of the land that I've given you, you rebelled against the command of Yahweh your God, and you did not believe him, and you did not listen to his voice. Why did the Israelites not enter the promised land? God delivered them from Egypt. He took them through the wilderness, and he took them to the land of Canaan, which was their promised land, but it was filled with, guess what? Giants. And so it came time for them to enter the land, and God had given them authority to conquer the giants and to take the land. But that first generation didn't go into the land because they were fearful and they were frightened, and they didn't trust the provision of God for them to overcome the giants. And so this verse says that they did not listen to his voice. So there's the key. If you're struggling to obey God, the key is to hear his voice, because when you hear his voice, you become empowered and you begin to have confidence and you begin to overcome. So it's not an issue of you trying to be like God and trying to be victorious. It's an issue simply of hearing his voice and responding to his voice. You see, the Israelites did not enter the promised land because they did not listen to God's voice. So the solution to rebellion and unbelief is listening. If you think, well, I'm a rebel. Every time God says go left, I go right. Every time God says make a stand, I run and hide in the corner. Every time God speaks to me, I go no instead of yes. If you're a real rebel, let me tell you what the solution is: listening to the voice of God. Or if you've got unbelief around your life, once again, it says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Okay, so the solution to rebellion and unbelief is listening. Did you know I got all of that from that verse? Did you realize that? Well, I read it to you again. And when Yahweh sent you out from Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and take possession of the land that I have given you. It's already been given to them. There's many things already been given to us. Go up and take possession of the land that I have given you. You rebelled against the command of Yahweh your God. So they rebelled. Did you see that? They rebelled against the command of Yahweh your God, and you did not believe him. There's the unbelief. They didn't believe him. And you did not listen to his voice. And what I'm trying to tell you is you can reverse that whole equation, and it comes from simply learning to listen to God's voice, because this is the truth. We all listen to voices. Every single one of you here today, you right now are listening to voices. I mean, I know you're listening to me right now, but in your life, you're listening to voices. There are voices that are screaming at you, shouting at you, speaking insistently and strongly, maybe even whispering to you, but they've got a strength to them. And you're hearing those voices, and those voices have influence, and they're affecting the way you respond and the way you react in your life. And so we have this whole symphony of voices going on. And often the reason we're not hearing the voice of God is because there's all these other voices. Have you ever been in a room with 100 people and you're needing to hear one person? But there's 100 people, and they're all talking loudly, and you're trying to hear the one person. And the solution often to hearing God's voice is not to go and do a course. A lot of people go and do a course. They pay lots of money to do a course on how to hear God's voice. And let me tell you, I'll save you the money. I'm going to a course to how to hear God's voice. They go to these courses on how to hear God's voice, and they get all these keys and these amazing ways that God can speak, and they feel all cool about that, but they still can't hear God's voice because nobody told them about the 100 other voices that are dominating their mind and dominating their thinking. And if somebody simply told them about all those other voices and taught them how to identify those voices and turn the volume of those voices down, you would start hearing God's voice, because his voice is in the mix. You don't have to manipulate God to get him to talk to you. He's talking to you. His voice is in the mix. It's just that's the problem. It's in the mix. And you can't identify it. It's not clarified from all the other voices. And you say, speak louder, God. Actually, it's a good prayer. If you ask God to speak louder, he will speak louder. Sometimes I pray, shout at me, God. If I need you to shout at me, God, shout at me. And shout at you, he will. But you see, the problem is we've got all these other voices, and often the voices are shouting at us. They're screaming, oh, you're no good. God's not there for you. He doesn't love you. You're not as spiritual as this person. And all these voices are screaming at us. And the whole time God is speaking, you are my beloved, and I have chosen you, and I'm for you. I'm not against you. And the voice is right there. It's speaking to you, but it's got lost in the mix because you actually choose what you listen to. How many of you know there's this thing called free will? It means you're sitting in the control panel of your life and you have control of the sound system of your life. And so think of it as a sound system like the sound systems that have lots of knobs on them. That one over there has 16 channels on it. And so you can choose which of the 16 channels you turn up and which of them you turn down. So God's giving you that choice. So you can choose to dial some voices down. You can choose to dial God's voice up. So that's your power. You see, you actually have the power of free will. So I want you to know you have a lot of power. You actually have power of that over that control panel of your life. God gave you control. You're not being controlling by exercising the authority he gave you over your own life. That's a control you need to take up. So many of you have been intimidated. You think you don't actually have control over your own life. No, God gave you that authority. And so you can choose which voices you listen to. So I know it's a bit of a rude awakening, but sometimes we have to wake up to the fact that we've got these voices in our lives. And in some way, somehow, we've actually chosen to let that voice have dominance in our life. But here's the good news. As soon as you realize you've done something foolish or crazy, you say, God, how did I do that? I don't know how to do that. Would you help me, God, reverse this situation? And so sometimes to get free, you've actually got to identify the controlling, bullying, manipulating voices that are trying to steal your life from you. Because unfortunately, those voices sometimes come through people. And it's not that we don't love the people, but we actually have to take our self-government back because God gave it to us. God gave government over your life to you. He didn't give that to anybody else. He didn't even give that to your husband and your wife. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to your husband and your wife. You should. But he gave government to your life over you. And when you take your self-government back, husbands and wives, you're going to be able to love each other way better than what you could ever love each other before. There's nothing worse than being in any type of relationship where two people are trying to control one another to get what they need from each other. Does that sound like a fun relationship to you? Well, how about you take your self-government back and you begin to walk in humility and operate in the authority he's given you, and now you have the ability to love in a whole different way than you could ever love before. Hallelujah. God's ways are good. And so it all comes back to listening. So we all listen to voices. You're listening to voices right now, and it's important to identify what those voices are. What are the voices that are speaking to you? The more you can label them, the more you gain your life back. That's a voice of intimidation. That's a voice of rejection. That's a voice of control. That's a voice of unbelief. That's a voice of fear. The more you can identify the voices that are controlling your life, the quicker you're going to be able to gain back control of your life. Here's a lethal combination that many people have. Voices of the past reinforced and amplified through voices in the present. You know, most people's lives are controlled because there are voices that dominated them in their past, often in our childhood. And I'll just pick on an easy one like fear and rejection. Like, you're no good. You're not strong enough to face this situation. There's the voice of fear. And you're never going to succeed, and you're no good, and nobody loves you. And so we got these messages in childhood. So what happens is as we go through life, everything in the present reinforces that message, whether the things that we're facing are reinforcing it or not. Did that make sense? We hear these voices, and because we believe the voices, it means that everything that happens to us, we filter it through the influence of those voices. And so the life we're living right now ends up reinforcing. And so you end up going to a loving church with people that love you. And lo and behold, what you're picking up from the people around you that love you is, I don't measure up, I'm not as good. I'm not as good as that person. I'm no good. They don't want me. And so that's the voice from the past being reinforced by things in the present. And so wouldn't you like to identify the voice that's controlling your life? How many of you would like to be a cop? You know, you'd actually like to have the gun, put the gun to the enemy's head, say you're under arrest. How many of you like to take back some control? Godly control I'm talking about here. Well, you can be. God's actually given you an authority to put the gun to the head of the controlling voices that are controlling you. You don't have to be controlled by those voices any longer. Is that good news? That's really good news. So here's a good prayer you can pray. What am I not hearing that I need to hear? What am I not hearing that I need to hear? So like I said, God's voice is in the mix. But maybe you need to hear his voice with greater clarity, and you can simply pray, God, help me hear what I need to hear. Help me hear what I'm not hearing. And so Israel didn't listen to God's voice. And here's the consequence. They spent 40 years close to the promised land, but not in the promised land. Remember I told you before, take note of this place called Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea was very close to the promised land. It was kind of on the border. It was the place where the spies were sent out to spy the promised land and to come back and bring a report. 12 spies were sent out. 10 of them came back and said, we can't take this land. We're puny. We're small. The giants in there are big. There's no way we can take this land. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, they said, we're well able to take this land because God has given us this land. Kadesh Barnea was the place where all of that happened. It's right on the border of the promised land. And so a whole generation spent 40 years or 38 years, took them 2 years to get to that point. They spent 38 years close to the promised land, but not in the promised land. Can anybody relate? It's like the promised land's on the other side of that line. It's on the other side of that border. And you spend your whole life trying to step into your promised land, but you never seem to be able to quite get in there. It was theirs. It had their name on it, but they didn't enter. In other words, it was their destiny, but they didn't enter. I want to help set you free from that frustration. I wouldn't like to live 38 years like that. Seeing the promised land, it's on the other side of the border, but you're not able to enter into it. Here's the good news. God didn't give up. He still had a plan. And so when we don't listen to God, he still has a plan. And his plan was for the generation that they were raising up, for them to hear the voice of God. That was his plan. See, if you don't hear the voice of God, you don't receive what you need to conquer the giants and live the life you're called to live. That's how simple it is. But the first generation didn't hear God's voice, but God didn't give up on them. And so they raised up a generation, and he made it really clear to them, guys, that's your promised land over the other side of that border. That's your promised land. I want you to listen to my voice, because if you listen to my voice, you will actually enter that promised land, not just see it from a distance. And so this is what he said to them. So remember the verse I read you was in Deuteronomy 7 at the start of Deuteronomy. That was to the first generation that didn't enter. Now at the end of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, now we're speaking to the second generation that are about to go in and enter the promised land. And I want you to pay attention to what God told them. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 1. And it will happen that if indeed you listen to the voice of Yahweh your God, to diligently observe all his commandments that I'm commanding you today, then Yahweh your God will set you above all the nations of the earth. In other words, if you listen to his voice, you'll have rulership in your life. You'll be the head and not the tail. Hearing God's voice leads to rulership within the land. Here's the thing. You don't really want to enter into the land without the rulership. You want to enter into the land and be confident in the land he's given you. And so when you listen to his voice, hearing his voice leads to rulership within the land. It just leads to rulership, full stop. And so God then presents a contrast. Remember, they're just about to go in and conquer the giants. You know, something significant's about to happen, and you've got everybody's attention. What's the first thing you tell them? The most important thing they need to know. So he's got the attention of the nation of Israel. And the first thing that's emphasized is you need to listen. You're going into a dangerous situation. There are giants in there. It's your land. I've given it to you. You're well able to conquer those giants. But don't forget to listen to my voice. Because you know what happens? We confront one giant and we go, yeah, we overcame. And we feel good about ourselves. And then what do? We forget to listen. And so then we go and fight the next giant, and then we get taken out. We go, God's not faithful. Where is he? You see, what we forgot to do was to listen to his voice. So God is so good. He armors you up before you go into the situation. He tells you what you need before you go into the situation. And so when God sounds like a stuck record, it's because he loves you. It's not because he hates you. It's not because he's like a nagging mother or a bony-fingered prophet. It's because he loves you. And sometimes he keeps telling you the same thing again and again because that's what you need to know. And so he says, listen to my voice. Don't forget to listen to my voice no matter what happens, whether you're having a good day or a bad day, because that's what's going to cause the difference between victory and defeat. And so to emphasize the importance of hearing God's voice, Moses goes on and he gives a dramatic contrast. So there's a contrast between a life full of blessings and a life full of curses. So I'm going to go on, Deuteronomy 28, verse 2. And all of these blessings, in other words, if you listen to the voice of the Lord your God, all of these blessings shall come upon you and shall have an effect on you. And then he says it again, if you listen to the voice of the Lord your God. Okay, God, stop nagging me. I'm getting the message. So God's being insistent because that's how important it is. Why? Because listening leads to blessings and blessings leads to rulership. Listening, it's not rocket science. It's simple. Any one day born again, 1 second born again believer can listen and hear the voice of God. Any newly born again believer can hear the voice of God. And listening leads to blessing. And that hearing the voice of God might be as simple as, I love you, my son. I love you, my daughter. Listening leads to blessing, and then blessing leads to rulership. So you might look back on your Christian life and think, well, I had rulership at this phase of my life, but I seem to lose some of my rulership. Maybe you stopped listening. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe you stopped listening. So then it goes to all these incredible blessings. I don't have time to read them, but you want to read it. There's like 14 verses or 12 verses of blessing. It's phenomenal. But there's like 3 times as many curses. It would take me all day to read the curses. There's like 60-something verses with all the curses. But he lists all the blessings. And then in verse 15, he says this, and then if you do not listen to the voice of the Lord your God by diligently observing all his commandments and his statutes that I'm commanding you today, then all of these curses shall come upon you and they shall overtake you. Do you think it's clear? God doesn't leave us in the dark. He makes it really clear. The difference between being apprehended by blessings or curses was listening to God's voice. That was it. That was it. Deuteronomy 28, go home and read Deuteronomy 28. It will tell you one thing. It will tell you that the difference between being apprehended by blessings or curses is whether you listen to God's voice.